Boom! It is Friday tonight, the 19th of May, 2023. You're back for another episode of the Tiger Town podcast. I'm Zach. He's Toby. Good evening, Toby.
Hey mate, how you going?
I'm not too shabby. How are you?
Oh mate, another sickness, another week of working from home and coughing up a lung, but seen the back end of it and figured we got to get this pod out. That was for those that are listening. That was the reason that we actually had a bit of a delay. Was I was in no real state to do it on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then I had a business meeting last night, so we
Yeah,
haven't
we
had
haven't
the
had,
opportunity.
we haven't had a good run the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago we were both out of action for a full week. We couldn't even do one on delay, and now this week we've had to postpone it. But here we are, Friday, mate. There was a game of football last night. We saw Penrith beat Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting time doing a pod in the middle of a round, but here we are.
Yeah, it's different. It's different. Like I'm not, we're not, obviously not going to talk about the Cleary run Panthers, but it is different that we can have still a bit of footy behind us before we do this. So
Yeah, most definitely. Mate, last weekend, 20-0 against Souths. Tell me something that you liked about it, or not even that you like, sorry, but I guess what was your takeaway
I was
from a Tigers perspective?
I liked 70 minutes of that game. I was extremely proud of those boys. I thought that was actually like, yes, the scoreline just does not do our efforts justice. We went up against a team who put 32 on the Broncos and kept them at 6 when they had Adam Reynolds. When they were actually at the peak a couple of weeks ago, and we kept them to
Mm.
6 for 70 minutes or 8 for 70 minutes.
Yeah,
So very, very, very proud. And it's what we've been talking about. It's been talking about, just showing desperation, effort, heart. And I saw all of that in spades.
yeah. The talk obviously across the board from us, other podcasts in the media. Nobody was under any illusions that we weren't heading into a game bottom of the table versus top of the table, and top of the table in red hot form too. Souths, no doubt. We all had pretty realistic expectations, and I think we basically said that if we gave a good account of ourselves and we're in the game for the majority of it, that we'd be pretty happy. And I guess in many ways they sort of even exceeded expectation in that regard. Now, I wouldn't say that's settling for mediocrity. I would say that's understanding where the team is at and where the squad is at, and the trajectory that we're trying to get to, and south of the benchmark. And as you said, 72 minutes odd, where we kept him to a single try. Had Brooksy looked to his outside to see Buller, it could have been 8-6 with 8 minutes to play, or 11 minutes to play. So we were in that up to our eyeballs, and 20-0 doesn't really reflect the entire game, I don't feel. What do you think?
No, God, no. No. I think that there was a couple of very dubious calls that led to tries, and that was part of a try. But in saying that, there's just there just seemed to be something about that team that we're not going away without a fight. Like and that's it. Like that's all we can hope for until these young guys develop, come through, get cohesion, the team gels. We understand how to work with Appy, all that stuff. We'll understand how to work with Appy more so. We're starting to get into that rhythm. But it was yeah, it's all we can ask for when we go up against a team like the caliber of Souths. Because when
Yeah.
Souths, like they have, geez, probably 5 of the top 10 players at the moment in their squad. So
Yeah, and they're all in form too, like outgunned across the park. Well,
yeah.
that's not entirely true. I think in the forward pack, we've got the pack to match them, and we did most certainly. But I think when it comes to key players, strike players, players that can make a difference on the scoreboard, quite clearly, just outgunned in that regard, and staying with them for so long was definitely a decent achievement. And as we said, 20-0 isn't a reflection of the game. The nil component, though, obviously it's been well documented and pretty plain to see that we've had our attacking issues this year. Did the fact we didn't get across the stripe on the weekend surprise you at all, or
No, it didn't surprise me. It definitely felt like it didn't really feel like we were spending as much time down in their 20 as we have in the past. I don't know the stats. I haven't checked the stats, but we know that we've spent over the last 8-9 rounds. We've spent a pretty large chunk of time where our forwards have done the job to get us into the 20. We just haven't converted. It felt like that game was played between the outside 20 and the opposition's 40. That's it, just middle of the park. That's how it found like it kind of played out majority of that game. It was like back and forth, hard defense, getting there. There was a couple of really good repeat sets from Brooks. But we weren't consistently down there that demanded that points be scored. There was a couple of times where, it looked like if the players, and this is going to be very rare for me. I'm not going to bash Brooks at all. I thought Brooks actually played quite well. His players weren't running the right lines. He was actually doing something that I've wanted him to do all year, where he was running at the gap to draw in the two defenders to create that hole. But then I was looking at the way Papali'i was running off him, and Papali'i wasn't running to that hole. He was running to the hole opposite, which was closed quite easily. So not all the time. That was just one example. But yeah, to summarize that, no, I'm not surprised. But I still think there's a bit of improvement there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they keep going to these swooping second man plays, which is commonplace in the league in this day and age, and has been for a little while. And I actually think Souths are one of the best defensive outfits this year. They completely revolutionised themselves from an attacking only outfit last year, where defence was clearly their deficiencies and their weaknesses, particularly on their edges, which happens to be their strength, Souths. But they're quite hard. They're quite hard to get by and to get through and get around. And that's being seen across the season. We saw the number they did on the Broncos. They obviously held Penrith to a whole lot of not much, and they did a number on Melbourne as well. And a lot of that, to be honest, came through their defence. I know the Penrith game was relatively tight. I think there was 2 or 3 tries in that. They held Brisbane, I think, a single try. Is that right? And I think Melbourne to about 10 or 12 points. So, across those 3 pretty decent, at very least pushing top 4 sides, defensively they held them pretty well. And it's no secret, as I said before, that we are struggling for attack at the moment. Back to talking about the second man plays, I think it's quite clear that we're missing the straightening aspect in our attack, whether it comes via the half, or whether it comes earlier in the sweep, or whether it's a matter of the sweeping men themselves, often being Buller, being able to sweep round, loop round, and straighten before he hits the centre or winger in a choice. I think it's definitely a work in progress. I think they're still going at half pace on our sweeps. I'm not a big fan of them. I don't like our structures when we play those. I don't think we're particularly efficient at it. I think even against the Dragons, we got away with a couple. And this was the week before, where Tupou and Nofaluma were actually able, to not get around their man effectively, but actually cut inside the defenders. So that doesn't strike me as an effective sweep at all. You haven't managed to gain an advantage on the outside. So that continued to continue for lack of a better term. And we just ran up against a hot side who were very good defensively, and we're struggling in attack. So, yeah, the 0 wasn't a tremendous surprise. It was a very tight match, as you said. And in fact, time in possession, they had the ball for 7 seconds longer than us over the whole course of the game.
Wow.
50% down the middle. The stats were pretty well split across the board. Completion rate 85, 86 respectively. They had 210 runs. We had 181. They ran subsequently for a couple of hundred extra meters because they had that as extra 30 runs. Post contact were comparable. Line breaks, they had us 6-1. Tackle breaks, they doubled us in that regard. But set distance was very similar, 43 to 42. Play the ball speed, we had them. Offloads were similar, 6 apiece. Total passes very similar. We threw 18 dummies. They threw 0. Kicks were similar. Kicking meters were similar. Forced dropouts, 1 apiece. Kick defusal, similar. Bomb similar. Grubbers similar. Effective tackle percentage. Both teams had over 90% effective tackle efficiency. So pretty evenly matched game. Obviously a heavyweight versus somewhat of a minnow at the moment. I think, as we've said several times, it didn't accurately reflect how close we were in that game and how much we stuck with his team. I don't think at any point they were deeply concerned that we were going to blow them off the park, obviously. But the fact they took a penalty goal, I've heard a couple of people mention that they might have been in second gear, Souths, and originally I had thought that too, and then I actually thought about it, and if a team who is on top of the table is 8-0 in front with 10 minutes to go against the team on the bottom of the table, and they're still sitting in second gear when they've got such a narrow, slender lead, then there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
At no point would South want to have been only 8-0 in front over the course of that game. They would have wanted to have made a statement. They would have wanted to racked up a score. They would have wanted to put the Cleaners through what, based upon the ladder alone, should have been an easy beat side. And so, yeah, I don't believe that was the case. If they'd gotten maybe to a 22-0 or a 24-0 lead early in the first half and then kick back a gear, I'd understand. But the fact the game was so tight, I find it hard to believe that such a ruthless side would have been in cruise control, considering, like I said, had Brooks thrown it right to Buller, there was a penalty goal in it at that point, and we were in it up to our eyeballs. So, for that reason and that reason alone, I actually don't think they'd done it in a canter, Souths. I think that they played quite well. They certainly defended well, and they did what they had to in the end, and their star power got them over the line. Latrell obviously chiming in for a couple of key plays at the end, and the class will out. But, yeah, good showing by the boys overall, and we got away from an injury-free, so not too bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, yeah, I've heard that thing about second gear too, and I find it very hard to believe when you have such a competitive player like Cody Walker in the side that anything's in second gear.
I agree.
That guy just doesn't know what a second gear is. Doesn't canter, doesn't do anything. He wants to win, and he wants to win bad.
Yeah, and you ask them if they were happy with one try in front, if they just want to cruise in one try lead, or if they want to push for 3 or 4 tries. They're pushing for 3 or 4 tries, and they're going to do everything they can to try to get that lead, because that's when you can be comfortable and you can relax a little bit in those types of games.
Yeah,
they would have started to feel the pressure.
Like, again, they dropped a fair bit of ball between like the 60th and 70th minute. When I say a bit, like maybe 1 or 2 very uncharacteristic like South's errors, and that's probably because I think they were feeling the pressure, and they're like, and I'm probably getting frustrated too, because again, it's the bottom of the table versus the top of the table. And they just could not crack our defense. And like our defense was good. It was very good. So
yeah. And not only the structures, but I think the desperation, the scramble was what was really pleasing to me, because that's the difference. The difference between leaking 3 or 4 tries earlier in that game, where Souths were on top of us for a lot of the game. There was a lot of, to use a Madge line, ebbing and flowing, and a lot of it, as you said, was played in the middle of the field. But Souths, to some degree, always felt like they had the upper hand. We certainly had moments where we were punching up through the middle pretty well and finding our way into not so much their end zone, but into their territory. I think it was one of those situations where they gave a good account of themselves overall. And although it's a loss and nobody likes losing any games, I don't think that the Tigers would have lost a whole lot of supporters in regards to their slow upward trend from the 2 weeks prior off the back of that performance. Had we been blown off the park 48-0, they would start to go, oh, okay, here they come crashing back to earth. It certainly wasn't one of those situations, I don't feel.
Except the news articles definitely painted it as that.
Nobody's surprised by that.
No.
And I think the fact those 2 late tries as well, they certainly played into that as well, because, again, the scoreline didn't really reflect the way that the game went. And I'm certain that South would say the same thing. So I can't remember whether a player or not from South may have actually said that.
No, I can't recall. I feel like Latrell said something along those lines at halftime. He's like, they're in this for the fight. They're in this for the long haul. And that's, as much as Latrell gets shit for how cocky he is a very humble bloke a lot of the time. So he's just a competitive bloke. He just likes to get in your face. And this is coming from a very staunch New South Wales supporter. So
Yeah, I'm sitting here with a brand new New South Wales jersey to my right, so I can't wait to barrack for him in a week and a half or so. Be good to have him in our colours, not Tigers colours, but Blues colours. So that'll be nice. Yeah, I agree with what you said in terms of Latrell. I think it gets to these sorts of things become a flashpoint, and you can get on tender hooks when it comes to controversial subjects. Obviously, as that race debate has been at certain occasions when it comes to vilification, that sort of stuff, and all those things that we know are obviously totally not on, as if we even need to say that. But that when you do put yourself on those types of pedestals, you're bound to get blowback one way or the other. And yeah, I agree with what you said. I actually think he's a pretty humble fella, and I think he comes from humble beginnings down there in Taree, and he seems a family man. He talks glowingly about his immediate family and his parents and all that sort of stuff as well. And yeah, I think when he's in interviews where he's just giving a decent take on his situation, and he's not carrying on with the sportsman bluster and the sort of the jovial cockiness that some of the sports or some of the superstars like to carry on with sometimes, that bit of swagger, which I think is mainly just for a bit of show, then yeah, I think it's nice to hear his insights in those situations, I guess. And yeah, that was a situation where he gave credit to us at halftime. I think the same thing happened at full time as well. I think he basically said that, look, we expected that from the Tigers. They came to play. They this year are a side who compete all the way, and we had to earn it in the end. And that's the way that it went. Was there anybody particularly?
I do have a slight problem with Latrell, but he obviously
Yep.
didn't listen to this podcast last week, and he still played.
Yeah, it's rude.
That's very rude, Latrell. We asked
Yeah,
you
it
to
is.
have some time off and go home, go to Tyree for a bit. Very rude you
Yep.
didn't. Very rude you
Yep.
didn't.
Very disappointed in you, mate, for that
Yeah.
regard. Anyway,
Yeah.
we told you to take Cody, take Cam Murray, take the boys up, have a weekend off.
Play the reserve
You didn't
side.
listen.
You didn't listen.
You didn't listen. No,
Yeah,
disappointing.
it's very disappointing, very disappointing. But you know what?
Mate,
Just make up for Origin.
hey, for you, did anybody stand out in that game in particular you were pleased with, or was it more of just a bit of a team performance? I know we lost 20-0, but in terms of how we played.
This is actually going to be very surprising for the listeners that know how much I bag him, but I was very pleased with Brooks. Very pleased with Brooks.
What in particular did you like about his game?
Well, it was very clear his defense was on point. He was making the right decision every time. He had some absolute cracking tackles against guys twice his size.
Put some big hits on too.
Yeah. But he was taking I think he made at least 3 or 4 half breaks again. He just kept taking the line on. He seems to have found again. Like, I don't know how he keeps forgetting it, but he found again that his strength is his running game, and everything flows off that. And that's what happened. Yes, he didn't pass it out to Buller, but it wasn't as if he, in previous weeks where again 90% of the decisions were wrong. It was I don't think he made a lot of wrong decisions. I don't think he had a lot of options.
Look, if he can continue the running game that it's been the last 3 or 4 weeks, and he can continue his kicking game, which has been vastly improved in the last month, then he's definitely filling a role as a 5'8". We still don't have a halfback, but as a running 5'8" who has a good kicking game, provided that those things can continue, then it's only going to be a good thing for the side, because I actually think the last month of football is the most consistent 3 or 4 games that I've seen him play in a good 4 or 5 years at most.
Easy.
At the least, sorry. So yeah, it's pleasing to see. He's obviously got his 200th coming out that we'll talk about in a minute. And to be fair, I've mentioned the Jareem Buller, no pass to the right. It was our only line break of the game, so it was a pretty poignant moment. It was a key moment, though. He caused that because there was a gap, and if you watch, he sort of Jareem shifting sideways, and he's sort of skirting sideways a little bit from right to left. Brooks retreats to get back behind Buller and then accelerates through when he spots the gap. Buller, to his credit, finds Brooks on that ball, straight through, clean break. And if you actually watch in slow motion, Buller is not as close to Brooks in terms of available to the pass as what it looks on the freeze frame. And it appears as though by the time Buller actually gets to there, because he was a little bit laggy in his support play, Brooks had already slightly looked to the left and made the decision to kick. Now, he hadn't kicked at that point, but it looks as though the decision had been made. So I think it was one of those split-second things where a still of Buller to his right looks a little bit worse than what it was. He was actually a little bit more behind in the split second before he actually chose to put that grubber. Poor choice, but hindsight's 2020. So unfortunate. Another example of a chance we didn't take. But look, to be honest, all things being considered, I think the performance in that Souths game would please a lot of people. And as much as there's still a lot of work to do, we certainly didn't roll over and allow Souths to have our way or their way with us, as we have done in recent seasons regularly. We think back to Melbourne, we think back to the Roosters abomination last year, sorry. So the fact that that side against the hottest team in the competition put in a better showing than some other teams recently that have been blown off the park by them is very encouraging. I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Hey, mate, head of this week, tomorrow, in fact, we've got the Cowboys, 5:30 down at Leichhardt, last Leichhardt game for the year. Obviously, due to the Women's FIFA World Cup, which is being hosted in our great country and in Sydney quite a bit. So we don't have access to that ground for the rest of the year, but obviously we'll be back there next year in some capacity. Leichhardt, the ninth wonder. Mate, what are you thinking heading into this game? The side itself looks pretty similar. Should I run through that first?
Go for it.
Buller at fullback, Nofaluma and Tupou on the wings, Toa and Talau in the centres, Brooks and Wakeham in the halves, Atuika Manu, David Clemmer and Apisai Coruscant in the front row, Papali'i and Bateman on the edges in second row. Pole at the moment is named at lock. Simpkin, Offahangawi, Twal and Asukapoa. I think we've got Sean Bloor there as 18th man. In fact, I just read out last week's list. But I think that's actually okay because I think it's the same list as this week. Sorry, I was looking at last week's stats. Anyway, same team. I think Safer, correct me if I'm wrong, might actually be the person who is 18th man technically this week, but there's a few things up in the air. Maybe I threw it to you a moment ago, but before we get to that, a couple of things going on this week with Offahangawi. What do you make of that situation?
Look, he's been a very good player for us. He has one of our best last year. I'm not upset with it because we've got some very good players up and coming. We've got there's a couple of spots that I think that Joffa is taking from some of the young kids that are coming through that can develop and be here long term. Would I keep him? I would, 100%. I don't want to offload him, but I'm not upset about it. So would have liked to have got something in return, but not to
we extended him to the end of 2025 last year. And at the time, he was probably the form prop last year. We all agree that he played excellent last year. He played a lot of lock, actually. So still playing as a middle, but a little bit of that ball playing middle. And definitely, we were massive fans calling for him possibly to be co-captain at certain points this year heading into the season. And in a side that was struggling for some sort of leadership, particularly in the forwards, with Tamau just not delivering on what he promised. Such an asset last year, Joe. And we're all big fans of him. He seemed to call out the club after the Sharks lost last year, himself included, everybody, and there seemed to be a little bit of a turnaround at certain points off the back of that. And so he has really provided a little bit of starch and experience and leadership in the pack over what has been quite a few, or a handful, I should say, of lean years for the Tigers. So he really came in at a particularly rough time and has done pretty well. I will say, though, since he signed that contract last year, the situation in regards to our forward stocks have vastly changed. And if the salary numbers are to be believed, 450 this year, 600 the next 2 years. Excuse me, sorry. He has fallen down to 4th or 5th on the prop rotation. If we look at Stefan Clemmer being the starters, Twal and himself there as the bench player. So he's getting 30, 40 minutes a week at most. And look, to be perfectly honest, if we've got the likes of Matamura or alike thinking about that 13 spot, Pole probably falls back into the prop rotation as well. And there's every chance that he could have been picked over off of Hengawi. So he's sitting at probably pick 4 or 5 in terms of our prop rotation at the minute, particularly with the form that Twal has been in. So the discussion then becomes, and this all has turned around since he signed that contract. Bateman has since signed on. Papali'i was up in the air massively at that time, and since obviously he's arrived and he's playing and he's finding some form. And Clemmer signed on the off season, so the likes of Papali'i can also play middle if needs be. You've got the likes of Bloor who can play in the middle. You've got Seafarth in the squad. You've got some of the blokes in New South Wales Cup that we've mentioned, like Atasi James and a few other players as well. So it's not a case, like you said, I love Joffa and I think he's done such a great job for us and I'd love to keep him. But if we're only going to get 30, 40 minutes out of him off the bench moving forward, I don't think that salary, albeit it's a relatively recent extension, is worthy of carrying on our squad. We've since, in the last 6 months plus, we've really turned our forward pack into not only our strength, but probably the deepest area that we have in our whole club. So if there's an opportunity to be able to relieve a little bit, not that we have salary cap pressure, but if there's an opportunity to relieve some of that cash, to take something that we have surplus skill in, or surplus experience in, or surplus quality in, being our engine room, our forwards, and redistribute it to clear areas where we are lacking, halves, and our back line, and the opportunity arises. By all reports, originally some people had said that Tigers have been shopping Joffa around. By all reports, what I've heard today is, in fact, it's been emphatically said that Parramatta were the ones who reached out in the first place. So I think we can put to bed that speculation that we were trying to move Joffa on. I think Parramatta have recognised that they have a shortage, what with their injuries to Regan Campbell-Gillard, Sean Lane now as well, and also obviously with Junior Paulo going to representative duties, possibly Ryan Madison getting picked up for a call-up. Jermaine Hopgood is being mentioned in the Queensland squad, possibly getting a call-up. So they're really falling short in that regard. It makes sense. Para have reached out. Then do we want to keep somebody for 600 grand who plays 30, 40 minutes in the prop rotation? Or can we get same, if not quite the same amount, but a similar output for a far cheaper option, allowing us to redistribute those funds? I think that's basically been what's been weighed up, and that's where we land.
Yeah, and I think that's come down. Seems to have come since Fulton's joined from a head of recruitment standpoint. So it's good to see that some smart decisions are starting to be made again. I will say the last 18 months are probably some of the best recruitment options I've seen by the club in consistently forever. We've had those 1 or 2 really good signings, but it hasn't been like consistent. How did we poach these guys sort of, and how did we make such a smart decision kind of outcome?
I'll double down on that and say it's not only the signings we've made, but it's the deadwood we've got rid of.
Yeah.
You go through who we've got rid of in the last 18 months, 2 years. You've got Peachy, who were able to move on. Garner, who was chronically underperformer and was, we liked bits and pieces, but he was C grade at best. We got rid of Musgrove, his entire contract, which was an overinflated contract that gave us nothing. Just another horrible overs on a player that just delivered bugger all. Little, we moved Little on when we had too many hookers. Again, full freight, same sort of dealio. You could even go back to the likes of Envi, moving them on. Moving Reynolds on in early stages of Sheen's getting on the scene. And then you add to what you're mentioning, some of the signings that we've made. People talk about Papali'i and Coruscant and Clemmer and Bateman, even the likes of Charlie Staines on a 1-year deal. Now, before he had his perforated bowel, I think you and I both would agree that he has really put a great foot forward, Charlie Staines. He was
100%.
looking really, really good. He's
100%.
not the biggest winger in the world. He's not the most gifted or skilled winger in the world, but he's certainly quick. And he was playing the house down, keeping Nofaluma in reserves. So I think it's a combination of those things. And I think people are very, very quick. Maybe that's not fair. Not very, very quick. But I think people have that tendency to once again get frustrated and impatient with a club because it's been so long. Because we're still 2 from whatever we are, 2 from 10. That results haven't turned around yet. But you need to look at the facts in terms of the squad and how it's been manipulated and maneuvered and changed and all this sort of stuff. So, long gone are the Madalinos and the Packers and the Reynolds and the McQueens and the James Robertses and all these sorts of players that weighed us all down, the Joey Leiluas and all these sorts of players. You look at the players that we've got on board now. You look at the fact that we're, near on $1 million under the cap already for this season, soon to be more if Offahengawi he's left. We've still got Mitchell Moses money sitting around waiting to be signed. The counter argument to people may make then is, well, we've had money for a little while and no one wants to come here. So what's the point in money if you can't spend it? One, it's never a bad thing to front load your salary cap, because what that means is you're future proofing in the future. So if the market and the cupboard's a bit bare at the moment, you can front load some of your salary or some of your contracts, pay people a little bit more up front, so that money comes back in the system. It's the opposite of what's happened with Brooks. So we had to backhand Brooks heavily so that he's now on 1.1. And how many people have you heard complain and make a mockery of the fact that Luke Brooks is on 1.1 million this year? He is on 1.1 million for the exact opposite reason to what we can do now with these surplus funds, which is front load contracts, which means in 2-3 years, when the market all of a sudden becomes a buyer's market and you've got multiple decent halves or backline players or gun centers all coming off at the same time, then you've got your checkbook and you're a player in the game at that point. Whereas if you sit there and you go, well, I'm just going to spend this money for the sake of spending this money, then you're just hoping against all hell that your checkbook is flush with cash at the particular time and in the particular season when there happens to be a lot of decent players on the market, which at the moment is not us. So, yes, we have had money for a little while, and yes, we've had a crack at a few marquees, and yes, we haven't landed any of them, of the big ones at least. Obviously, we've spoken about the decent names that we've landed before. But inevitably, sooner or later, as the team itself continues to trend in the right direction, as this side starts to show a little bit more mettle and grit and they start to build slowly, as we get a junior or two filter through, if we keep having this money around that we can front load and we can keep it in surplus from year to year, just waiting for the right opportunity over the next year or two, people will come back on the market and players will become available. Guns who are rookies this year or maybe playing their first year of Flegg or New South Wales Cup this year, in 2-3 years, they might be the next Campbell Graham. And all of a sudden, we're flush with cash, and they might want an upgrade from $200,000 a year that they were playing at Newcastle, and they only just started in 2025. We pay them $600, and bang, we land a new Campbell Graham with a centre at the top of their game. That's what happened with Papali'i. Papali'i come from the Warriors to Parramatta for a chance on a baseline contract. Played the house down for 2 years. We went in because we had money at the right time. We needed a second row and went, we'll take you, thanks. And we blew Parramatta out of the water. We didn't pay silly money. If you recall, we actually paid about $650 when the Cowboys pinched Leilua for $750.
Yeah.
So these are the types of things that you can do when you've got extra salary cap money if you can't spend it immediately. So that in a way is my counter to what people would say that with Joffa. Why are we getting rid of him? Why are we weakening our squad when we're already flush with cash? What use is freeing up another 200 or 250 for the rest of this season and freeing up another 600 next year if it slightly weakens our squad? And if we can't spend it on anybody, that's what the benefit is. Because in a couple of years as well, we're going to have all these juniors that are coming through who they might not dominate the league, but they are certainly a strong crop of juniors that we're going to want to keep. What's the major thing that set us back in the last 10 years? Losing Mitchell Moses, James Tedesco, Aaron Woods, all at the peak of their powers. Had we kept that core group of players together, because we'd been wiser with our salary cap, because our recruitment strategy had been on point to nail down our juniors, we could have maybe kept those blokes because we had the funds in store. We could have brought in one or two decent marquees from outside, and all of a sudden we could have had a gun side 2015 onwards. But we didn't because we mismanaged it. So if we make sure that we've always got this little bit of money available, we front load players, we're looking for our best juniors, we've got plenty of cash, we're never at risk of losing the ones we want to keep because we've got plenty of money to pay them and upgrade them constantly and reward them based upon effort and based upon performances. It's future-proofing what we're doing. And it's when you haven't made the finals for a decade, that's possibly the hardest thing to do, but it doesn't make it not the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a hell of a tangent, I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do best.
That's what we do best. So
the odd tangent. I had mentioned the Cowboys game and we just sort of jumped into Joffa, but anyway,
we'll get back
talking salary cap. It's interesting, these tangents sometimes.
Well, we can talk more a bit about that because there is that talk now that Johnson has decided to turn down the Tigers. I don't know if you read that.
Yep.
Yeah, I personally thought this was always going to happen because his reason is I don't want to uproot my family from New Zealand again, and it's true. He's playing his best football in a very long time, probably because he's back home, and he knows this. He doesn't want to uproot his family, and that's completely fair. Completely fair. So, but that does pose an interesting question. Now that Griffin's gone, do you make a play for Ben Hunt? Because you know he wants the Dragons.
Yeah, it depends. He obviously wants out. I don't see him coming to our club, particularly at his age, because he's been overpaid for a long time. So it's as if money is the issue. I think he has said as much that he doesn't want to go through another rebuild. He's going to go looking for premierships. So, as far as I'm concerned, everybody in the media seems to think that Canterbury are closer to a premiership than us. Might be sour grapes. I don't think that's the case whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
I think Canterbury have a far better squad than us across the board, far better balance than us this year. And I think that they are really underachieving. They're one win in front of us.
Yep.
So I think all this bluster about him being the secret ingredient for Canterbury and just put Ben Hunt in there and it changes everything. They've had a bit of an injury crisis, granted, but they've got some gun signings in there, Canterbury. And so I dare say that will probably be where he goes, because I think that as much as people say they don't listen to the media, I think they do. I think these narratives take on lives of their own and they get into people's subconscious minds, and he will start thinking that way, and his agent might suggest that, and Gus Gould will be talking to his agent. I dare say he'll probably end up there, and if he doesn't end up there, he may well end up at the Roosters.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was thinking the Roosters.
Considering what's happening with Keary, whether or not he gets moved on with the head injury issues, all it takes is another one, and he's in shady territory. We saw what happened with Jake Friend and Boyd Cordner. Joe Manu is woefully out of form for somebody who has been, the best player for quite a number of years now in some ways. So I'm just trying to do that refocus again. Doesn't want to for whatever reason. There we go. Was it last year? Joey Manu was Golden Boot?
Yep.
Yeah. And the other one is Sam Walker, who obviously was out of favour, was dropped for 3 weeks, then injured his knee. So he's out for another 4 to 5 now. So you won't get much of a taste of that. So I reckon that if Ben Hunt can make his way out of the Dragons, because he's still, I think, contracted for the next 2 years, he will end up at Bulldogs and Roosters. And I also am not interested in really paying 1.2, 1.3, which would be what it would take to even have us closely in the conversation to get Ben Hunt, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
No, Sean Johnson, I could cop at 650. Had he been interested, because it's a value proposition at that point. What I would have done, or what I suggested actually before Johnson had turned us down, was this: re-sign Brooks for 1 year, re-sign Wakeham for 1 year, sign Johnson for 2 years. Dewey will come back, sign Ethan Sanders from Parramatta, who's their gun up and comer. That gives us Oliver Laurie, Ethan Sanders. It gives us our Iverson Matai, who we just signed from the Bulldogs, who's a half. We would have those three in the juniors coming through, give a couple of them a taste at the back end of next year. We have Brooks and Wakeham compete with Johnson for the 5'8" position for next year. There's a bit of competition there. Dewey will come back. Have those three, Brooks, Wakeham, and Dewey, compete for a squad spot for 2025. Johnson would still be there for 2025, and then have that replacement come through from one of those juniors, be it Laurie, Maddie, or Ethan Sanders, who's playing flag for Parramatta at the moment, absolutely killing it. Have them take over in 2025, maybe as the rookie, as the starting position. That then also gives the likes of Alex Conti in our 17s and 18s, and Onatoni Large, who's there as well, as our two next gun halves, who are still 3-4 years away, the opportunity to then take their roles in development. Whether it's development contract, they start playing some Cup 25, they get a taste maybe late 25, and then they look to bleed in 26, 27 around Benji's era. So if this is me, I'm thinking long-term, and that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking 3 or 4 juniors that we're happy with, 3 starters that we're happy with, and 1 experienced half that we can hitch our wagon to for 2 years to get us around the park. Because by that time, unfortunately, the likes of Bateman, Clemmer, and Appy are going to be getting to the ends of not only their contract, but probably the ends of their career. And realistically, they've been some of our better players this year. So if we don't have ready-made replacements for them, like for like, then getting this half timing right could be a bit of a problem.
I literally have nothing to say to that. I think if you're listening to that, you just heard gold. So, but if we want to go back to that, like that's just something I wanted to put out there. But we'll go back to the game this weekend. There is an interesting development that happened during the week that most people should know about or should be aware of. In the fact that Luch will be playing. Luch got brought into the squad. He got cleared.
Has he been confirmed that he'll play yet? He's definitely in the squad, but have they said that they'll definitely rush him in?
From what I read yesterday, yes, but I will double check now.
He has been given dispensation to be able to play. I just find it hard to believe they would look to rush him straight in on the weekend like that.
Well, he's still 23, and they've cut it down to 2 reserves, and he's one of the reserves.
Yeah.
So
what role do you expect him to play? I would assume he'd be playing limited minutes off the bench.
I'd say so. He'd probably take the likes of maybe Granville. Obviously Granville's been used as a prop lately. Maybe even Riley Price. Probably take that position. But he was playing fronty last year. Year before, last year. Yeah, because he went mid-season. So, yeah, maybe he's back in the forward rotation off the bench.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Personally, and I touch wood when I say this, when I think of him possibly playing this weekend, I can only think that he must be underdone. Hasn't played a match since late last year. No trials, training, like opposed training, sure, but
it's different in game time.
You must think he's going to be underdone, and not only in from a fitness aspect, but he's been out of the game. So if he didn't play, because he got stood down in the season last year, didn't he?
No, I think it was off season.
Was it?
I think, don't quote me on that, but I think so.
Okay. I thought it was late regular season. Either way, say it's September or whenever he played his last game. Because he didn't play for him in the finals, I don't think, did he?
No, so he did because he got stood down right before he went over to play the World Cup. Because he was supposed to go over with Samoa or Tonga. I can't remember which one he did. I think it's Samoa. He went to go over and play with Samoa. He was about to get on the flight and he couldn't go because of his charges.
Yeah, okay. So September. So it's been 8 months since he has played a game of football. So not only from a fitness standpoint, but just from a reading and pace of the game standpoint, he hasn't been in a game of NRL football for 8 months. Somebody who has an accelerated ACL program, they could get back in that space of time. So it's a long time out of the game. That being said, I'm always very mindful to play down the expectations of opposition players. We know why. As being Tiger supporters, we lend ourselves to think that might already put us on the back foot, or that we would put out there in the universe that somebody might have a shocker and then they absolutely brain us. But if I'm the Tigers, I'm finding him the moment he comes on the field, and I'm running everything I can at him.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that one as well.
And more appropriately too, if he's on an edge, I'm splitting whoever he's with, whoever he's next to, whether it's Townsend or Dearden. I'm running it either shoulder constantly. Because the decision making and the links between them can't be there.
No, very true. Very, very true.
Yeah. What do you see as North Queensland's major threat on the weekend? Who worries you in their side? I've mentioned in it.
Oh no, he's not back, is he? Tamalolo wasn't named.
No, he's not.
Oh,
No, he's not back.
There
No,
was whispers that he was, and I forgot that.
that would have been a very West Tigers thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it usually is. It's usually when the big players come back is when they come back against us. I agree. You mentioned something, and I'm going to steal your thunder here because it's probably what you were going to say. But you mentioned that that Drinkwater is their linchpin. You shut him down, things do collapse. I agree with that, but I'm going to sort of elaborate on that a little bit more and put pressure. Like if we put pressure on Dearden, that's going to also really affect Drinkwater's decision making as well of where, like, when to chime in and when to not. So I think basically, I think Townsend's nothing special, but he's solid. That's all you can say. It's the other two that can turn nothing into something. So if we shut those two down, I think that goes a very, very, very long way into winning this game.
Yeah, I actually agree. For me, Drinkwater's the big one. I think if we can get up and jam him early, I think that's a big thing. But we've got to hit and stick with Drinkwater because he can be quite slippery. And I agree. I think with Townsend, you do generic pressure, but I think with Dearden, you actually rush Dearden. Force him in to make quick decisions. I think he's still very young. I think he's a pretty decent player. He's actually he surprises me how good of a runner of a football Dearden is.
Yeah,
I think he's a bit.
He was annoying in Game 3 of Origin. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I think he's actually a bit of a stronger runner of the football, particularly through the hips, than what people might give him credit for. People think he's a small little halfback, but yeah, I think he's not a bad player. But I think he's the type of player that if you rush him, deliberately rushing him, so blitzing out of the line, throwing a bulldog straight at him as much as you can, as often as you can, and just being a menace all over Dearden, that can, if it does nothing else, Cowboys might shift some of their work away from him, which might blunt their attack a little bit if Townsend then has to take the majority of the kicking. And obviously, yeah, Townsend's got a good boot and he's a premiership winning halfback. So he's not anybody to take lightly, obviously, but I think that would flatten them a little bit, maybe, and could play a role. Yeah. I was going to say, for me, though, the big one is Drinkwater. He could be electric at times. To me, he doesn't look like a sort of bloke that would, but he just is. He's quick. He's elusive. He does for the Cowboys in some ways what Reece Walsh can do for the Broncos. I don't think he's as electric as what Walsh is, obviously, but he's certainly unsuspectingly quick, unsuspectingly slick, and he's got a really good ball on him, particularly a big cutout ball.
Yeah. It's really funny, but like it is a very random off topic and all that stuff, but I was watching some YouTube video the other day, and it was
was it Tiger Town podcast episode from last week?
No, it was after this. It was suggested after.
Right.
Okay. It was actually the Tiger Town podcast was suggested after I watched this. That's pretty good.
Good.
No, it was something for KO, and it was watching the most watched YouTube videos of the NRL of that year, or of last year, and one of them was when Hastings kicked the field goal against Parramatta, against South, and the people watching it was Kyle Felt and someone else, and Kyle Felt made a joke saying that was probably the last game they won that year, and I was just watching that going, motherfucker, you're the reason that we didn't win the other game because you cheated. Oh, yeah, that really just burnt me. And then I just realized then we haven't played them since the game.
No, when did he say that? Was that after? When was that? When were they watching that?
Oh, it was just on a YouTube video. They were just like, it was like NRL players react to footage. I'll send it to you after this, and you can have a bit of a watch at it. But yeah, just watching that.
I used to not really mind Felt as a player, but yeah, he's just rubs me the wrong way with stuff like that. And obviously last year, the smirk on his face when that whole thing went down. You know how these things go, though. we're due a square up, so we won't get it
That
in terms of the referee component. But
I actually think we will. I think we will. I think they know how badly they bit the bullet on that one. I think we'll get a bit of a square up in terms of, I think the ball will bounce our way in terms of those 50-50 calls. Whether that wins us the game, I'm not going to say anything like that. But, those 50-50 calls, probably 8 times out of 10 go against us. I think you will see him go for us tomorrow.
Well, that'd be good. And if the literal bounce of the ball can go our way too, that would be good too, because we would probably have another half dozen, 5 to 10 tries. I actually truly genuinely believe if, small little bounces of the balls in that regard, physically and literally, would have gone our way over the course of the season. I think we've been remarkably unlucky when it comes to that. I think I've dropped the ball over the line 5 times this year, maybe 6.
Probably more.
It's been remarkable. Yeah, there was a run of 5 games or 4 games straight where we dropped a ball over the try line. Literally over the try line. So yeah, quite frustrating in that regard. But mate, let's jump to what you think is going to happen in the game. How do you see it playing out? We'll do that. We'll do our bowl predictions. We'll wrap the show up.
Yeah. All right. So first bowl prediction, Twally gets a try. Second bowl prediction is Buller breaks his duck. And then how I see the game wrapping up, I think we're going to come out firing. It's been a while since we've done that at Leichhardt. I think we'll have a point to prove because of last year. Because that obviously was very, very, very much yeah, I'm not going to say it was cheating, but no one's going to sue me, so who cares? It was cheating. But I think they'll come out firing with a point.
That's just your subjective opinion, though. You're allowed to have that.
That's right. I think we'll come out firing, and I think we'll go in ahead by 18 points at halftime, but I think we'll win by 12.
So you reckon they'll come back at us?
I reckon they'll come back at us. They'll win the second half, but we'll still win by 12.
I actually get the feeling we might lead from the front as well. And they might come back within a try, and then we'll maybe get one late, or we'll hold on for a bit of a nail biter in true Tigers fashion. Got a scoreline?
32-20.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Penalty goal or 2 missed kicks?
Oh. You know what? Wakeham's actually kicking really well. I'm going to go penalty goal.
All right, cool. I could live with that. I've got us at 24-16.
So no missed kicks.
Yeah, no missed kicks. Valentine to miss one from the sideline, maybe hit the upright.
I like it. I like that a lot.
I've got a Stafford Toa double.
I'm liking Toa in the centres at the moment. Hey, I actually am.
Yeah, so am I. He's been playing the house down.
Yeah.
I can see him getting one on a break, so a long range one, and I can see him getting a little crash over or like a ricochet off a kick or something for a close one. So I can see his Toa double.
Yeah, I think he's definitely, if he keeps going like that, I'm going to switch my tune in saying that our best centre pairing is Kapoa and Naden. I'm going to say our best centre pairing is Toa and Naden.
Certainly the way he's playing. Yeah. I still have Kapoa in my squad. I think he's nice and versatile now. I like him as a player.
He's on my bench for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think Talau can go.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For me this week, it would have been Kapoa in for Talau and probably Blore in for Talau altogether. So Blore onto the bench. Blore played the absolute house down last week in New South Wales Cup. He was spectacular.
Was he?
Yeah, brilliant. Scored a try. I think he set up another round for over 150 metres and played hard. He looked fantastic. So hopefully it's only a matter of time before he gets back in the squad. I dare say with Offahan Gowie moving on most likely next week based upon Tim Sheen's interview that next week we might maybe see Blore work his way back in, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, like there was reports that if Joffa fails the medical, but if he gets injured, that deal's dead in the water. So
yeah, well, fingers crossed it doesn't happen. In all likelihood it won't, and unfortunately we'll see him move on to the Yields. But he's been a great service for us and serviceman for us, I should say. And I can't speak more highly of his time with the club. I've been really impressed by everything he's done for us, and unfortunately the good ones go sometimes. And on we march.
Yep.
Mate, 5:30 Saturday, 5:30 PM. You and I are going to be watching it from the elevated region of Stanthorpe.
Yeah, we're going to be going on a bit of a motorbike ride tomorrow out to Stanthorpe and battle the nice chilly weather that we both enjoy.
go pick up a fresh set of thermals for the ride, I think, mate. And
Yep.
Dad's on tour doing a little overnight together up there. That'll be nice. That'd be cute.
Yep. It will be. It will be.
So we'll be watching the game 5:30 p.m. Up at one of the Stanthorpe hotels, one of the lovely establishments up there, and probably staying upstairs after a couple of scooters, I dare say. If you are a listener of the Tiger Town podcast and you live in Stanthorpe, look for our ugly mug somewhere around. You'll see us probably a little bit too loud watching Fox Sports there in one of the pubs. So love to have a yarn if anybody's around. Might be in a Tigers jersey or two. Might be easy to spot. We'll have to wait and see. Public service.
I'll have to put that in the bag, won't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a couple of them.
Yeah.
Public service announcement.
Sorry, I was about to
Sorry,
say,
mate.
I got the old Phillips jersey, so maybe I'll just bring that along, nice and warm.
Drag out the old Balmain one, eh? You and the blue wiggle.
Me and the blue wiggle.
Bringing back Balmain Tigers.
Sorry, keep going.
Public service announcement. We do it every single week. YouTube, Spotify, Tiger Town podcast on both. Hop on the Facebook one in particular and follow us. It allows you to interact with us, send us a DM, do whatever you want, ask us questions, give us ideas for the show, all that sort of stuff. We don't get a tremendous amount, but we certainly get a handful, and I love it. It's awesome. It's so cool to hear even a little bit of feedback, constructive criticism, ideas, opinions, all that sort of stuff. It's bloody well awesome. So please do that. It's a great thing. It makes us really enjoy what we do. We hopped on here with two blokes as a microphone, having a yarn once a week, and yeah, it's wonderful to see that there's people out there that actually enjoy listening to us. People, however, that do it better are West Tigers podcast and West Life podcast. We give them a shout out every single week. Those guys do a fantastic job. Get on and listen to them. They are brilliant. Joel there at West Tigers podcast and Josh at West Life podcast. So get around those boys as well. Mate, been a pleasure. Late show this week, Friday show, but we've got it done. We've got it out to the masses. Links hopefully going up tonight, if not first thing tomorrow morning, just in time for the Tigers game at 5:30 p.m. at Leichhardt Oval. If you're in the local area, make sure you get down to the, ninth wonder. Cheer the boys home. Got a good sense about tomorrow. Fingers crossed they can put a good showing in, mate. Been a pleasure. Thanks for tuning in.
As always.
Anything else to add?
Just go the Tigers.
Go the mighty Tigers.